Now let's continue with some of the differences between the New York five families and the Chicago outfit. We'll start with boss of the Gambinos, Carlo Gambino. This guy's an old dinosaur, going back to the old Al Capone Prohibition days. Very good friends with Tony Accardo. And just like JB, he kept a very low profile. He flied under the FBI's radar for years, making hundreds of millions of dollars. Don't let this man's looks and appearance fool you, but he's one of the most wealthiest, powerful men in the country at his time. Now, here's a photo of Carlo surrounded by FBI agents, and he's even in handcuffs, but only spent one night in jail. And years ago, some Irish thugs from the Westies gang kidnapped his nephew, I think it was, or grandson, and held him for ransom. They found out where he was hiding. Carlo Gambino had a sit-down with his underboss, Neil Della Croce, upcoming boss Big Paul, and John Gotti. Carlo Gambino gave the contract to John Gotti. Shortly after that, John Gotti, his best friend Angelo Quack Quack, and a guy Gaglione killed the guy. But there was witnesses, and they got caught. They went to jail. They kept their mouths shut. They got out. And that was the rise of John Gotti and the Gambino family. Carlo Gambino gave John Gotti his very first piece of work. But this was a legendary La Cosa Nostra gangster that kept a very low profile, was very quiet, just like Tony Accardo, a good friend of his, somebody he respected. Now here you got, going back to the Al Capone gang as well, you got none other than Joe Aiuppa, Joey Doves. This man, like a Neil Della Croce, led the Chicago outfit with fear. And other mob bosses, guys like Bruno and Nicky Scarfo out of Philly, and Paul Castellano, Fat Tony, Tony Dunks, not only respected Joey Aiuppa, but feared him in the Chicago outfit. At times, the New York guys needed some of the Chicago outfit's political connections for certain businesses they had going on. And more times than not, Aiuppa, Accardo would comply. According to Nick Calabrese, right before Joey Aiuppa went to prison during the Strawman case, that's where he got pinched with Angelo LaPetria, Jack Cerrone, Joey Lombardo, guys from Kansas City and others for skimming millions of dollars from the mobbed-up hotels and casinos in Vegas. Right before Aiuppa went to the can, he had a meeting with Joe Ferriola and Sam Carlisi. He was so pissed off, specifically at Tony Spilotro. He was literally foaming at the mouth. He told Carlisi, I want them both knocked down, 1 and 2. I don't care how you do it, just do it. Joey Aiuppa warned guys like Paul Castellano, Fat Tony, not to trust certain people like Jackie Presser Jr., like Jimmy the Weasel and others. Joey Aiuppa knew they were informants and tried warning these guys. But the New York guys, they didn't listen. Speaking of New York guys, here's a made member of the Buffalo family in New York, Roy Carlisi. This guy controlled most of your gambling, strip clubs, nightclubs in upstate New York, Canada, and Western PA. He attended the famous Appalachian Mountain in upstate New York, where all the mob bosses got together and got raided. He was there. And he asked permission from Tony Accardo and Joey Aiuppa if he could send his younger brother, Sam Wings Carlisi, down to Chicago. The Chicago outfit opened their arms for Carlisi. And then Carlisi eventually started working as Joey Upa's chauffeur and his driver. Here's Sam Wing's Carlisi. I went to his trial in the early 1990s. I'll never forget it. Picture sitting at the defense table, surrounded by attorneys. You got Sam Carlisi, boss of Chicago outfit, his right-hand man, little Jimmy Marcello. Right there, Tony Zizzo. And then you had the Hatch, Anthony the Hatch Chiramonte. In front row, you had the Bonavolante brothers and a couple other mob guys. Picture seeing all these guys in one room. Then you had James Lavelli and that lowlife Lenny Patrick. Scumbags testify against these guys. I'll never forget every time the prosecutor or Lenny Patrick or Lavelli would refer to Carlisi as boss of the outfit, Carlisi would fucking lose it. He would get up, start yelling, that's not true. He's not the boss. Glaring, yelling, getting out of hand. He was reprimanded many times. 2 times they had to stop court. One time he had to be escorted out of the courtroom. But that's one thing he did not like, was when somebody called him boss of the Chicago outfit. They called him Wings because he would travel all over the country on outfit business. Bill Romer testified that he would spend anywhere from 6 to 8 trips to New York a year. That was in Manhattan, on New York, Chicago business, or upstate New York to see his brother. According to Nick Calabrese, Sam Carlisi was the first guy Nick greeted when he walked into the basement. He shook his hand. Carlisi made a couple wisecracks about Nick's tan, and according to Nick, it was Carlisi that took part in the brutal beatdown of the Spilotro brothers. Nick also said that Carlisi kept cracking Nicholas DeAndre in the head with a gun, accidentally killing him. But this is Sam Carlisi, heavyweight in the Chicago outfit, whose brother was a made member in the Buffalo family. Now here's a sleeper of the Chicago outfit, Jimmy the Rat, Jimmy the Weasel. This guy's a real piece of shit. Joey Upa warned Tony Ducks and Fat Tony not to trust this guy. And after Johnny Roselli was found in a 55-gallon drum somewhere in Key Biscayne, Florida, Iupa had to sit down with this guy, started questioning him just to see his reaction. Luckily, the Weasel kept his cool. Otherwise, Iupa would have killed him right there on the spot. But it turned out Iupa's suspicious were 100% spot on. He was an informant and ended up cooperating, bringing down a lot of heavyweights. Joey Iupa warned guys in New York that this lowlife here could not be trusted. Here we got Joe Ferriola, Joe Nago, Mr. Clean. He owned all kinds of dry cleaners and laundromats throughout the city of Chicago. Some of them still going strong today. He was boss of Chicago outfit. He was one of the men that participated and gave the go-ahead to kill the Spilotro brothers. And according to Nick, after they were brutally beaten, stomped to death, it was Ferriola that invited Feccarata and Nick Calabrese to a diner to have coffee. Ferriola told him to cut his gloves into little pieces. Unfortunately, though, we lost a great leader. He died of some illness he had. I think he was in his late 50s, mid-50s. But devastation to the Chicago outfit. That's one thing I think Chicago outfit had better leaders. Guys like Turk Torello, Joe Ferriola, Carlisi, but they either got pinched or died early on. But according to Bill Romer, Ferriola would accompany Tony Accardo to New York a couple times a year, where they would meet with some of the New York brass and discuss their business. So there definitely was a connection between the New York brass and the Chicago outfit brass. But Joe Ferriola was a legend in the Chicago outfit. And here, another legend in New York, another strong leader. You got the Chin. He was boss of the Genovese family. He put on the lunatic madman act for a couple of years. Some people were really believed that he was crazy, but the FBI agents that were surveilling him knew he was more like crazy, like a fox. He eventually got pinched, but the Genovese family, they're like the Ivy League of all the five families. He was he despised John Gotti for his being so flashy, bringing down all the heat on organized crime, but mostly for killing Paul Castellano, breaking a golden rule about killing the boss. But the chin could never really get to Gotti because Gotti was always surrounded by army of people and surrounded by agents. Gotti was always under surveillance 24 hours a day. So what Chin did do, he started picking off and killing everybody close to Gotti, like Frankie DeCicco, blew him up in a car. Gotti's right-hand man, Bobby Borello, shot him right in front of Gotti's man, Eddie Lino, was one of the trigger men in the Paul Castellano hit. He got pulled over by the two mob cops, and they ended up killing him. So this was scaring the shit out of John Gotti, knowing that every one of his closest allies is getting picked off. But the Chin, like all these mob guys, eventually got indicted, got convicted, life in prison. But he was on tape kind of complimenting and bragging about the Chicago outfit, how tight they were, how organized, and how that they, along with Detroit, had the least amount of informants, unlike all the fucking rats in New York. Now here you got Big Paul Castellano. Unfortunately for Paul, he chose to be in the wrong business. He was a businessman, not a street guy. Here's him walking out on bond. They're walking into the court building in Brooklyn for the commission trial. And, you know, Gotti, Frankie DeCicco, and Sammy Gravano, they really fucked up by killing Big Paul. Not only did they break a rule, bringing on a lot of heat, causing national attention, but Big Paul was going to jail. I mean, all the defendants in the commission trial were convicted. Paul was one of the defendants. He would have ended up in jail. So Gotti could have easily taken over the family that way. But Paul Castellano was very close with Joey Aiuppa, Jack Cerrone. He would ask Aiuppa for advice, and he knew to leave Chicago alone as far as not taking over any of their interests in Nevada or with the unions. Again, back to Chicago's reputation, going back to Al Capone, Tony Accardo. Paul Castellano was not stupid. He knew it would be best to become allies with Chicago outfit, not enemies. But unfortunately for Paul Castellano and his good friend Tommy Bellotti, they were set up and brutally killed outside Sparks Steakhouse in New York City. Here we got one of my favorite mobsters, boss of the Genovese family, front boss, Fat Tony Salerno. He was one of the defendants in the commission case. I definitely wanted to go check out his social club, Palma Boys Club, right there in East Harlem. That's definitely on my bucket list. But Fat Tony was on tape bragging about the Chicago outfits, saying something that those guys in Chicago will break your heads with baseball bats. He definitely respected and feared them. And like I said earlier, Aiuppa warned him not to trust Jackie Presser, Jimmy the Weasel, and others, but Tony Ducks, Fat Tony didn't listen. Here we got boss of Lucchese family, Tony Ducks' good friend, Tony Carello. This guy was one of the defendants at the commission case as well. Big union guy, made millions of dollars in the concrete club. They actually wired up his driver's black Jaguar, picked up hundreds of hours of conversations. Tony Ducks was talking about how serious the Chicago guys are, how much political power they had, talking about union business and bragging about he made more made guys than anybody in the five families. Unfortunately, he was convicted as well. But Tony Ducks was warned many times by Joey Aiuppa and Jack Cerrone who to trust, who not to trust. but for some reason, they didn't listen. Here we got John Gotti, flamboyant boss of the Gambino crime family. He took over, obviously, when Big Paul got clipped. Had a couple good years in and out of court proceedings, bribed a jury a few times. That's one thing New York was better at than Chicago, was definitely getting to the jury. I know in the Chicago outfit trials, they tried to get to some of the government witnesses before, like Lenny Patrick's or Nick Calabrese, but I'm not sure if they ever tried to bribe a jury, but that was somewhat common at some of these major trials in New York. Just imagine going to the John Gotti trial and seeing Sammy the Bull as the government's main witness. Those trials are legendary, kind of like the Family Secrets trial. But unfortunately for Gotti, it was his big mouth. They got him on tape talking about murders with his good friend Frankie Locke, talking about murders he should have been talking about. They get locked up together. Sure enough, Sammy Gravano flips, cooperates, brings down the entire family. But I bring up John Gotti here because late 80s, early 90s, excuse me, Tony Arcardo, because this was all in the newspaper, the Gotti trials, and Sammy flipping. Tony Arcardo had to sit down with John No-Nos DeFranzo, Carlisi, some of his heavyweights, Ferriola, etc., and warned them not to end up like this Mamaluke, this Chumbalone John Gotti. I forget the Italian word he used, but he was showing them you definitely don't want to do what John Gotti has done. He's in the newspapers. He's on Time Magazine, pretty much brought down the entire crime family. So Tony Arcardo was giving his underbosses, the guys that were going to take the full reins of the outfit, he was giving them great advice not to follow along in John Gotti's footsteps. Some of the Arcardo's guys listened and others did not. Now here we got some snitches. Here we got Jackie Presser, mobbed up guy, union guy out of Cleveland. And then you got the biggest crook there, George Bush. I'll never forget when Joey Lombardo testified. They were saying, Joey, you're boss of the Grand Avenue crew. Joey denied it. Joey said, President George Bush and Dick Cheney have a bigger crew. The whole courtroom laughed. But here you got Jackie Presser. This guy became an informant. And again, Joey Aiuppa warned Fat Tony Salerno, Paul, Big Paul, and Tony Ducks not to trust this man. But Fat Tony Salerno didn't listen to Aiuppa. He trusted Presser because Presser's father was a solid guy. Speaking of solid guys, you got Louis the Mooch, Ebele. His father was a made member in New York. They killed him. The New York guys were concerned that Louis, their son, would take revenge, which he would have. So they asked permission from Aiuppa, Tony Arcardo, if they could send Louis the Mooch down to Chicago. Again, they rolled out the red carpet like they did with Carlisi, welcomed him with open arms. Louis the Mooch became a made member of the Chicago outfit. I think he went to work for the Grand Avenue crew, maybe Elmwood Park, Melrose Park, I forget. But according to Nick Calabrese, when they got there after he made small talk with Sam Carlisi, someone said they're here. Now, Nick said he's getting tense. They all had gloves on. He knows what's about to go down. Allegedly, little Jimmy pulls up with the Splatro brothers at the house in Bensonville. Michael walks in first. Nick was the first one to greet Michael because he knew him. They were friends. He greeted him with a handshake and a big smile. Michael probably nervously shook Nick's hand. Nick immediately grabbed his ankles and kind of tackled him, while this man here, Louis the Mooch, strangled Michael with a rope. Nick said Michael didn't put up much of a fight. He went kind of quietly. A small .22 caliber gun fell out of Michael's pants. According to Nick Calabrese, John No-Nos DeFranzo picked it up, emptied out the bullets, and wiped a smudge of blood off the wall. But this is Louis Ebele, one of the men that brutally killed Michael Spilotro. and his father was a made member in Chicago, in New York, that was killed. Another connection between the Chicago outfit and the New York guys. Now here's a Chicago outfit associate, a friend of mine. We'll call him Paulie C. Unfortunately, he got pinched in a racketeering case, and a good friend of his, somebody who helped, did favors for, got him a job, helped his family, pays him back by wearing a wire and cooperating against them. Real scumbag. So he got Paulie on tape talking about various crimes and threatening people. But I bring this guy up because Paulie did his time like a man, spent some time at the MCC, which is a real nasty prison downtown Chicago, very similar to the federal holding prison in Brooklyn where all the mob guys stay. I'm not going to compare it to Rikers Island in Cook County Jail, but just as nasty, a little bit smaller on the federal side. But when he got shipped out of there, Paulie C told me that I forget what jail he went to, but he said he was around all New York wise guys. And when they found out he was affiliated with the Chicago outfit, they hooked him up with commissary and rolled out the red carpet for him. They really showed him nothing but the utmost respect because of the reputation of Chicago outfit. And he told me that the New York guys were great guys to do time with. Now here's boss of all bosses, in my opinion, the most successful, most powerful guy in the history of organized crime. You got none other right here from Chicago, Joe Batters, Tony Accardo. As we all know, he goes back to the Al Capone days. I loved how he came under the tutelage of Paul Ricca, surrounded himself with Guzek and Hump and Gus Alex, all very, very smart men. Meyer Lansky, High Limer. I mean, it goes on and on and on. This guy had connections all the way from the Chicago cop all the way up to the presidents. Claimed to be a liquor salesman, made millions of dollars in the rackets, never spent one night in jail, kept a very low profile, and really schooled other members of Chicago outfit to keep a low profile, to stay off the government's radar. Some men listened, some men didn't. I'll never, ever forget hearing about the brutal murders of the burglars that broke into his home and exactly what happened to them. But Tony Accardo was very well respected and feared by all the bosses in New York, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Detroit, Santo Traficanda down in Florida, Carlos Marcello down in Louisiana, crime families in Canada, Montreal, Toronto, even in Sicily. This was, I'll never forget going past his house in River Forest. He's got 2-3 houses. One day they actually had an auction where they were auctioning off certain memorabilia pieces from his house. Unfortunately, my girlfriend and I got in a fight that day, and we didn't end up going to his house. A major regret, but I would have loved to went there not only to see his home, but maybe buy a piece of memorabilia. But here's Tony Accardo, one of the most powerful men in the country. And like Anthony Volpadenzo said in tape during the Mike Sarno trial, Tony Accardo made millions. Now here's Milan, Michigan, right? This is where all the wise guys end up. A lot of New York, Chicago, wise guys end up here. They all know of each other's reputations, but it's here where they actually break bread and meet and get to know one another. Some of them actually build friendships. You got guys like Nick Calabrese, Jimmy Marcella were here, Junior, Frank Calabrese. But this is one of legendary federal prisons where a lot of your East Coast Chicago outfit wise guys end up. Speaking of East Coast guys, we've got Angelo Lutz, an associate of the Philly crime family and boss of the Philly crime family, Skinny Joey Merlino. They were locked up with Chicago outfit guys. Angelo Lutz spent some time with Marco the Mover D'Amico and two other guys, I'm forgetting their names. He actually cooked for them. They became good friends. And Joey Merlino was locked up with a couple outfit guys as well. And on Joey's podcast, somebody asked him about Chicago Outfit's reputation, and Joey said that they're no fucking joke. Joey also said that his father, Chucky, was real tight with Sam Momo Giancana, Arcardo, and some of the outfit brass. But here's some Philly guys still alive today. They have nothing but great respect and actually did time with a lot of Chicago outfit guys and heavyweights. These are stand-up men. Now here we got the little guy, Tony Spilotro. We all know about him. Made member of the Chicago outfit. And at one time, he was well liked by Tony Arcardo and Joey Upa and some of the other heavyweights. Very, very close with Rocky and Joey Lombardo. And this guy had all the potential in the world, upcoming boss. And they actually gave him the keys to the kingdom, if you will. Like in the movie Casino, they had it all. When he went out to Vegas, he fucked up. He recruited all of his low-life criminal friends from Chicago to move out there with him. So rather than keep things in line and keep a low profile and keep things quiet and not draw a lot of heat, he didn't listen to Joey Lombardo. He didn't listen to Tony Arcardo or the old man, Iupa. He did the exact opposite. They start killing people. They start doing cowboy shit like robbing people. They start selling stolen merchandise. They start selling drugs. They start getting involved with motorcycle gangs. They're getting all coked up doing hits. And then he starts fucking around with the Jew's wife. All of a sudden, less and less money is arriving to Chicago. The outfit bosses had enough. They were originally going to kill him out in Nevada, keep things out there. They couldn't really get to him. They were getting a little upset with the crew. They called it off, switched to plan B with the ruse that this guy here was going to be a boss and his brother was going to be a made man. They got whistled in. The guy that set him up, they trusted. They went to a house of a made guy. When they got to that house, they were brutally beaten, stomped to death. A different crew botched the burial. They ended up finding their bodies. It became national news. In other crime families, the guys in New York, Philly, Detroit were shocked. They obviously knew that was the Chicago outfit that was responsible. So again, that goes back to Chicago outfit's reputation. I hate to say it, but you live by the sword, you die by the sword. Some people don't believe Nick Calabrese' testimony. They think there's no way all those heavyweights would be in one place at one time to take out two brothers. Some people think Nick Calabrese said that just to make his story more believable. But I believe that they were there. And the reason they were there, they wanted to personally be there to get their fucking lumps and kicks in. That's how pissed off they were at Tony Spilotro for fucking everything up. They had it all out there in Vegas from A to Z. All he had to do was behave himself. He does the exact opposite direction. And look what happened. Now here we got Frankie Schweiss, one of the most dangerous men of Chicago outfit. He's right up there with, pick a guy out of New York. Who do you want to pick? You want to pick Gregory Scarpa? You want to pick Roy DeMeo? The Center Twins? Who do you want to pick? This guy's just as dangerous and evil as any New York guy. According to informants and information during his family secrets trial, he was kind of like a free agent for the Chicago outfit. Even though he was under the Grand Avenue crew and Joe Lombardo, he did hits for some of the New York guys, whether it was in New York City or other cities around the country. Kind of like a Wings, but Wings was more there on business. His traveling trips were for murder. This is the prime suspect in killing Marilyn Monroe, believe it or not. He's also the prime suspect in killing his beautiful Greek girl after her body was thrown in the Chicago River. He was the prime suspect during the Danny Seaford hit. One of the men at the family secret trial, but he was too sick to stand trial. But just imagine seeing him in court with Frank Calabrese and Joey Lombardo or Jimmy Marcello. I can't even imagine how he would behave himself. But one thing I have to make clear, according to a YouTuber out there who claims to was good friends with this guy, Frankie Schweiss, was there the day the Splachos were beat and stomped to death. He told them everything. They all sat around and drank scotch to get him loose, to get him drunk. Then they took him downstairs and beat him. But one thing, Nick Calabrese, who was there, never once mentioned that Frank Schweiss was at the house in Bensonville. Nick Calabrese never said that they all sat around and drank scotch. So the story of Frankie Schweiss being present when the Splachos were beat to death is total bullshit. Now here we go on a softer note. We got Shorty Lantia, a close associate of the 26th Street crew. Why this guy was never made, I'll never know. He did a lot of work with the Chinatown crew. But I think the reason he was never made is because his boss, Angelo the Bull, was a real prick. But one time he was locked up. I don't know if it was I think it was in Milan, Michigan with Frankie Calabrese. And they were locked up with some New York wise guys. And Shorty made the mistake. He told these guys that he was a made member of Chicago outfit. So obviously, back to the respect, back to the fear. They welcomed Shorty. They became friends. A couple months later, Frank Calabrese found out from the New York guys that Shorty said he was a made guy. When the Breeze found out, he fucking went ballistic. He started bitch slapping Shorty Lantia and verbally abusing him, belittling him. I mean, this guy is no sloucher. He did a lot of work. He was very close with the 26th Street crew. He's known the Calabrese brothers and Angelo the Bull and Feccarata and Caruso's for years. He's like family. But technically, he's not a made man, but again, the associates sometimes can be just as dangerous, but shows you what a prick Frank Calabrese was to abuse a guy like Shorty Lantia, who was locked up with New York guys. Another big difference between the New York five families and the Chicago five families is a lot of the New York guys, their fucking sons, grandsons, and nephews, they all wanted to be gangsters. They wanted to follow in their father and uncle's footsteps and ended up getting involved into that life, get involved in drugs. A lot of them ended up dead. A lot of them ended up in jail. Where in the Chicago outfit, I mean, there's a few like Junior or Rocky Lantia, but in the Chicago outfit, our sons, we don't want them in that life. We don't want them going to jail. They became college educated. They became lawyers like Alex Salerno, stockbrokers like Frankie Caruso, Nick Ferriola, real estate development, construction guys, engineers, legit, unlike New York guys. So as you can see, there's a lot of differences between New York and Chicago. New York was one fist, one glove, small, tight, one boss, one underboss. New York had five families all fighting against one another, either snitching on each other or killing each other. Just like years ago, the Bulls used to go to battle with the New York Knicks. The New York Knicks were a nasty, tough, physical team. When you drive the lane, they would knock you on your ass. However, they were no match for the Chicago Bulls, 6-time world champions. I have respect for New York, but I'm taking Chicago all day long. Thanks, guys. I hope you enjoyed that story about New York and Chicago. Let me know what you guys think. Please hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. Hope everybody has a good week. And for all you YouTube smartass haters out there, turn off the channel, put out the cigarette, take the fucking old lady to Olive Garden, guy. Have a good night.